I'm sitting here on a stump on the gorgeous shores of Lake Michigan. As you can see behind me, the miles of sand and water and not a soul in sight. If I look out over the lake, over my shoulder, there are miles and miles and miles of just God's creation. You know, it kind of helps me to think about how small I really am in this big universe and how unimportant I am. That's important. Sometimes we need to stop and ask, what is most important, don't we? I think some of the people who followed Jesus were wrestling with all of the Old Testament scriptures and the hundreds and hundreds of commands and the sermons by the prophets and all of the history, and perhaps we're wondering, what's most important? One lawyer actually put it in words. He said to Jesus, "What is the most important commandment?" And you remember that Jesus gave not one, but two. He said the first and greatest commandment is this: to love the Lord your God with all your heart and soul and mind and strength. And the second is like it: love your neighbor as yourself. And then he said, all of the law and prophets hang on these two. In other words, love God and love your neighbor. That's what's important. In fact, that's what the whole scriptures are really about. And everything else in the whole Bible is just a subcategory, an explanation or illustration to help us to know these are the two big ones: to love God and to love your neighbor. Even the Ten Commandments divide in half. The first half about loving God and the second half about loving your neighbor and how to do it. You know, there are parts of the Bible that are pretty tough to understand, and some that just kind of even may turn us off if we don't fully comprehend what they're about. But let me say this: if I interpret some part of the Bible in a way that doesn't fit with love God and love your neighbor, then I didn't get it right. Because Jesus said that's the whole message: love God and love your neighbor. If some part of the Bible doesn't appear to be teaching that we should love our neighbor, then I'm not understanding what that story is all about. Because these are the two big ones, and everything else in the Bible fits with these: love God and love your neighbor. Well, out here on the beach, I feel pretty small, looking at 80-some miles of water and I don't know how many miles of empty beach. But God is here, and God is important. And as I look at the 66 books of the Bible, it can feel a little overwhelming. Let's remember this: it all boils down. This is Christianity in a nutshell. This is following Jesus in two sentences: love God and love your neighbor.